Welcome back, everybody. It's Tuesday, July 25th. John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report. Welcome, coming to you live from Washington, D.C. to talk about the latest, adjusting my camera, to talk about the latest news from Ukraine. As always, let me get TikTok rolling here on my iPad, and then we will get rolling. Maybe take a couple minutes, as we always do, for folks to arrive on TikTok and YouTube, etc. Introduce yourselves, say where you are from, if you would, and then we will get rolling. I'm in DC, as I said earlier. Oh man, I am so freaking tired today. The dog has been off the last few nights. During the day, she's fine, and middle of the night, she's acting like she's got to go out, and she goes out and doesn't want to go. Like 2 hours of this last night. Oh my god. Anyway, microphone. Sorry, TikTokers. So yes, the dog had me up from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. last night. It was like, oh my god. And I didn't take a nap. So there's a good chance I'm going to be yawning at you guys at some point. Thank you, Tomcat and Lee. Appreciate that. Oh, hey, John. Thank you. Everybody introduce yourselves if you would. Your dog too, Ash? Yeah, I mean, 2 hours of her, basically, who knows? Clearly not feeling well, but oh my God. So I'm cutting things back tonight that may have caused it. Hey, Elizabeth, thank you. And Heine, thank you as well. Anyway, hello all. Oh my God. Now it's not melatonin. She wasn't feeling well. Like, you get to know your dogs. She wasn't feeling well. That was the problem. Hey, Heine, thank you for that. So I'm cutting back some stuff, giving her a little food before dinner, which might help. Little weird things you learn. Thank you, Martin, Elizabeth, and Nate. Thank you for those. Anyway, welcome everybody. We're going to start in with about a minute. We'll start. I usually like to start the show and wait a minute just to talk to folks, to give people on TikTok and YouTube a chance to arrive. I stream on my laptop at the same time. You TikTokers, I've got you guys on my iPad. Thank you, Elizabeth, for my cowboy hat. Anyway, hey, oh, I was going to say Jan, but if you're in Amsterdam, maybe you're Jan? Maybe? I'm not sure how you'd say it in Dutch. Jan? I'm going to go with Jan. It's not Jan, that's for sure, though. Hey, Bjorn. Hey, Nebraska. Oh boy, guys. Yes, I've got my iced tea here, so hopefully it'll keep me perked up enough to make it through the end of the show without yawning at you guys like a lunatic. Oh, much better. There we go. Much better. Okay, guys, let me get rolling. So I am John Aravosis. Welcome to you all. This is my nightly show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S. Oh, John. Okay, John, that works too. 6 o'clock Eastern Time, U.S., coming to you live from Washington, D.C., where we talk Monday to Friday about the latest news from Ukraine. Hey, Anna Romanova. Very nice. Thank you for the gift. Who was that? Grace with the gift. Oh, no, it was Grace with the gift. Thank you, Grace with the crown. So the way the show works is I start off by going through the news that I think matters, helping you analyze it. Edsel, thank you, Edsel. Kind of a cute gift for you, Edsel. You're a softie. I didn't know that. You're in Hungary now. Ah, okay, interesting. So the first half of the show, we'll be talking about the news. Second half of the show, take your guys' questions. What am I going to say? I very much appreciate your guys' gifts, so please do keep the gifts coming. All the TikTok gifts, love it. Thank you very much. The YouTube gifts as well. Thank you, Ava, for that. Basically, the gifts are fun, which is nice, but they're also very helpful because I do this as my full-time job. I decided when the war broke out, I was just going to devote myself to covering Ukraine full-time. We've been doing fundraising. Actually, I added up the fundraising today. Thank you, Pedro. The auctions, just on the auctions that we run on Discord, where I sell cool stuff we get from Ukraine, we've raised $10,000 just from your auction bids that we've passed over to Ukraine. Now, there's another around 90,000 or so that we've raised directly from you guys. Whenever we do the fundraisers to fundraise for different things, we've raised 90 or 100. Actually, Vlad and I are putting together the list right now. I wanted sort of the latest number. But so basically, we've raised about $100,000 over the last year for Ukraine, which is pretty cool. And in any case, that's why I mentioned the gifts, because I've been doing this full time. This is my job. And basically, the way it works is I'm able to keep doing this because you guys give the gifts, and the gifts let me pay my bills. So Purnell, thank you, Purnell. And so thank you for that. Please do keep them coming. You may be frozen, Kid Rock. Hold on. I just want to make sure YouTube's working, that it didn't freeze. 1 second, guys. Hey, YouTube, is it frozen? Do I need to reboot the page really quick or no? Okay, just making sure. YouTubers, sorry, we're going to wait. I stream on my laptop as well, guys. So I like to kind of be sure that everything's working on both systems when I do this. Okay, it's good on Twitch. Thanks, Evie. Okay. Anthony, I'm going to guess no means okay. It's always confusing when people give what we're good. Okay, that's fine. All right, no problems on TikTok. I mean, on YouTube. Thank you, TikTokers, for the hat. Okay, so let me get rolling here. It is day 516 of Vladimir Putin's 3-day special military operation. Thank you, Happy Beach. Good to see you. The Zaporizhzhia, we'll start with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. So, get my handy dandy Ukraine map. You know, there has been concern for a while now from the Ukrainians that the Russians may be playing games with the big nuclear plant in southern Ukraine. Russia took over the plant towards the beginning of the war. Basically, you know how Russia controls all of this. Well, the nuclear plant is right here. The southern tip of this landmass, right south of the river, literally on the southern bank of the river, right here, is the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant in the town of Enerhodar, Ukraine. Now, the Russians control it. They control the plant. And the Ukrainians have been very concerned for a while now that the Russians may try to blow up the plant. They have intelligence that the Russians were either going to blow it up a while ago. Thank you, Pedro. Maybe 3 to 4 weeks ago, they were either going to blow it up or they were going to do a false flag and pretend to blow it up. False flag attacks are basically a false flag attack is basically when a government, usually it's a government, thank you, Marcy, for the gift. A government decides to do something, but then they pretend it was somebody else. So in this case, it would be Russia actually blowing up the nuclear plant. Thank you, Mike, but pretending it was Ukraine. So Russia would do some kind of an explosion or something and go, oh my God, look what the Ukrainians did. That would be a false flag, or you're falsely trying to flag someone else to blame, right? So one of the concerns is that Russia may not try to actually blow up the plant. They may have some kind of explosion happen and then intentionally release, thank you, Adam, intentionally release some nuclear something in the air so that the detectors go off. And they say, oh my God, there's a nuclear leak, where it was actually Russia scientists letting some nuclear stuff go in the air, right? Thank you, Shane. And then what does that accomplish? Well, let me show you again where the plant is, okay? The Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant is right here. Where is the counteroffensive happening? Well, the counteroffensive is happening around here, around here, around here, around here, around here. But the main point is Ukraine needs to get Kherson or Zaporizhzhia province. Those in the short term to medium term, those are two major goals of the counteroffensive, to basically get these two provinces and cut Crimea, Russian occupied Crimea, off from Russian occupied eastern Ukraine. Thank you, user 4914. The nuclear plant's here. If the nuclear plant were to blow up, or the Russians were to pretend the nuclear plant were to blow up, they would say, oh my God, this is terrible. We need to evacuate the area. Thank you, Allie. So they would say, we need to evacuate all of this area. Well, if you evacuate all of this area, that makes it very difficult for Ukrainian troops to take this area back. So that's what they think the Russians are up to with the nuclear plant. They're playing a game where either they're planning on blowing it up or they're planning on pretending it blew up so they can say, thank you, Chad, so they can say, oh, well, now we have to evacuate everything. We can't have a counteroffensive in the area. Thank you, user 4914. United Nations, international, whatever, come and make sure nobody invades this area, right? Thank you, Succeed. Well, the latest on this is the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is basically a UN watchdog group, did find today that Russia has placed landmines near the nuclear plant, around the nuclear plant and the outside. IAEA is very upset about this because it is a violation of the security protocols, but they did also add that they do not believe that the mines would cause any serious damage to the plant, which is good if they went off. Nonetheless, if you really believed the Russians were planning on doing a false flag where they pretend that the explosion that goes off, that they of course set off, caused massive damage, right? The mines serve a very useful purpose for that, because they could have a lot of smoke and mirrors, going off, sort of, whoa, the big explosions. And then they would say, oh, now we've got to shut down the whole area. So anyway, very disturbing that they found that. The second disturbing point, the United Nations watchdog said today, the nuclear watchdog, thank you, Megan, for the goggles. They said today that Russia has still not let the United Nations inspectors go to the roof of the reactors. The Ukrainians have said for a while now that they are one of the major concerns they've got is that Russia may have put explosives on top of the reactors. There's 6 nuclear reactors at the Zaporizhia plant. Thank you, David, and Beats as well. I love that thing on the head. That always cracks me up. That there's 6 nuclear plants, and Ukraine's concerned that 2 of the plants may have explosives on top. Okay. Well, the Russians now, for a good 3 weeks, have refused a United Nations request to inspect the roof. They're letting the United Nations into the plant overall. Thank you, Chad and Bonnie, both there. Appreciate that. They're letting the United Nations into the plant. That's how the UN was able to find the mines. But they're telling them you cannot inspect the roof. Why is Russia hiding the UN from visiting the roof? Well, the satellite photos a couple of weeks ago seemed to show something on the roof, something new, some small white objects that people, again, weren't sure, were they reflections, of the sun, or were they actually some bombs or something? We don't know. Thank you, Maverick. But it is incredibly suspicious that Russia is not allowing the United Nations to even visit the roof of these reactors. That's the concern. Thank you, Bonnie. So, Ukraine confirmed today that it has used cluster munitions around the town of Bakhmut. You will remember these are the American munitions recently provided to Ukraine. Bakhmut is the Ukrainian town here in the east. The Russians currently control it. That's the town that the Russians tried about 11 months to get. And finally, after 11 months and 100,000 casualties, thank you, Kanausi, meaning 100,000 men injured and or killed, Russian men, Russian troops, they took this town of 60,000 people. That doesn't matter strategically. But Ukraine's trying to get it back for a variety of reasons to basically embarrass Russia. And it's complicated. I've told you about it. I'm not going to go through all of it now. We can talk about it during the Q&A if you want. Thank you, Nicholas, but because I've explained that a lot before. Navalny, a little bit of an update. Alexei Navalny is a Russian opposition leader. Putin had him jailed because, it's what Putin does. Navalny came out today and called Igor Girkin a political prisoner and called for his release. Now, Girkin is the guy I told you about a few days ago. We've talked about him a lot before. He's a Russian military blogger, meaning a former military official who goes on Russian social media and gives his opinions of kind of what I do with you guys, to be honest. Thank you, Adventure. I do it with video. Girkin does it with text. So he would go on Telegram, for example, I think. Thank you, Crazy American. He'd go on Telegram, one of the social media services the Russians really like a lot, or WhatsApp. And he would, or Telegram actually, he would write paragraphs of his thoughts, a paragraph or two. But he'd write them on and on. Oh, thank you, Carlos. Very nice of you. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. And he would write his thoughts on the war. Well, Girkin is a far-right nationalist. He wants this war to win. He wants it to win so badly that he thinks Putin isn't doing enough. Okay. So he's been critical of Putin, not because he's critical of the invasion. He's critical of the invasion, saying Putin isn't being tough enough on the Ukrainians. Okay. Just to give you a sense of who Girkin is. The other thing you need to know about Girkin is that he's a convicted war criminal. The Dutch courts found him guilty of blowing up that civilian Malaysian jetliner. Thank you, Tanya. Back in 2014. Remember, there was a civilian airliner, 238, I want to say. I've got to check the number. I think it's 238 passengers flying over Ukraine, a regular passenger jet blown out of the sky by a Russian Buk missile. It was found that Girkin was responsible, among others, convicted, but they didn't have his body. They didn't have Girkin in the court itself, so they haven't been able to put him in jail, but he is a convicted war criminal. That shows you who Girkin is. Anyway, fast forward to the present. He's criticized Putin a lot on the war. After the insurrection, after the coup a few weeks ago, maybe actually a month ago now, Putin finally had it. And now he's going after generals now. He's going after the military bloggers like Girkin. He's starting to throw people in jail because Putin is basically feeling threatened. We're going to talk about that later on. Actually, the next topic about Putin and kind of how he's feeling of late. Thank you, Jetta Mom, after the coup. But the bottom line is he throws Girkin in jail. Thank you, Bonnie. And Navalny, the opposition leader, who a lot of folks in the West like, Ukrainians don't like him so much, Navalny, but a lot of people in the West like Navalny. And Navalny comes out and says Girkin is a political prisoner. He should be released. Well, a lot of Ukraine's defenders and Ukrainians were upset at that because Gherkin is a war criminal. The thing is, Gherkin can be a war criminal and a political prisoner. He was not arrested by Putin because he's a war criminal. I mean, the Russians are glad he blew up all those civilians. That's what the Russians do. That's what they're doing in Ukraine on purpose, mind you. The only country that does it on purpose, well, only country of certainly of a developed, well, Russia, I wouldn't even say Russia's a developed country, but thank you, Lise. But basically, Russia intentionally targets civilians, and we know that. The rest of us do not. But the issue is, so he's arrested. He's arrested not because he's a war criminal. He's arrested because he spoke out against Putin. That is putting someone in jail for their political beliefs. That is wrong. I would agree with people who say, thank you, Maverick, that, you know, it might be nice if Navalny focuses on other issues, right? He only has so much time in the day focusing on, you're leaving us. Sorry, I had to get rid of somebody over. An angel got its wings. Oh, by the way, thank you for the gift there. Who was that? Marcy. I just updated the emojis. Paid subscribers on TikTok and the paid members on YouTube, you now have a angel emoji that we can use whenever. There you go. Ash just used it. That you can now use whenever I get to zap a troll myself. But I actually updated YouTube. I don't think I may have updated a couple. TikTok, I updated several of the emojis. You now got other ones as well. There you go. Oh, that's cool, actually. What was that? Chris? I don't think, oh, you got those wings somewhere else. Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool. Those work too. In any case, you know, I guess the reason I wanted to bring this up is I am certainly sympathetic to the argument that this guy's a war criminal, so maybe we shouldn't spend a lot of time worrying about him. Fair point. But if you are trying to turn Russia into a democracy and you're trying to turn it away from the path of dictatorship that it has always been heading towards and always comfortable with, you have to be uniform in the application of the law. You can't go throw people in prison for criticizing the president because they're right-wingers, or excuse me, not even right-wingers, because they're war criminals, but then say, oh, but the rest of the people we won't throw in jail, right, for criticizing the president. Well, if you throw the war criminal in jail simply for criticizing the president, when the right-wingers get in power, they're going to throw you in jail for criticizing the president. You've got to be consistent. This is why in the U.S., for example, there's a group called the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, and traditionally, because they basically defend the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution of the United States, and in other words, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, these kind of things, right? The ACLU gets itself into hot water occasionally in our country because they defend these rights for everybody. When I was young, one of the most famous cases ever, if not probably the most famous case really, that the ACLU ever defended was they defended Nazis, American Nazis who wanted to march in a Jewish suburb of Chicago. And the ACLU defended them in court because the ACLU wanted to make sure that America's application of the law of freedom of speech applies equally to everyone, because if you start picking out people you don't like who don't get your civil rights, then the other guy starts picking out people who they don't like. Anyway, very controversial, but taking us back to Navalny, that's why I'm bringing the point up, because I am totally sympathetic to the argument that, you know, Navalny's in prison right now. Perhaps he could worry about other things than Igor Gherkin. Fair enough. But Navalny, at least arguably, is trying to create a country that is no longer a dictatorship, a country that recognizes everybody's rights equally. Therefore, I think it's actually a good thing that he's speaking out on behalf of Gherkin, because he's showing what you would do in an actual democracy, right? We would say, I don't care if you're far right or far left, you're allowed to be a jerk, basically, or an ass. It's allowed. You're allowed to criticize the president. Okay, I'll move on from that topic. Very interesting article today in the Washington Post. And I'm going to read a little bit of, maybe summarize some of it for you guys. Quick sip of tea. So this article is about Putin's response to the coup and how basically Putin was incredibly weak responding to the coup and pretty much didn't know what he was doing for about 36 hours. Thank you for the swan person for the swan. Thank you for that. the Washington Post interviewed a number of Western officials. Basically, they talked to Ukrainian security officials, meaning defense and others, and they also talked to a lot of Europe. Well, I never know how to call this. They said European security officials. The problem is Ukraine is in Europe. So it's a little weird when you say Ukrainian security officials and European security officials. But what they mean is um, Ukrainian security officials and maybe say NATO countries security officials is a good way of putting it, or Western security officials. Okay. In any case, they talked to these guys, and what they found was that Putin was paralyzed and unable to act decisively in the hours following the coup. Now, what was really interesting about this, thank you, Elizabeth, for that, is that Putin was warned. You're right. No, Elizabeth, you're right, actually. Are you that Elizabeth? The one who did the SNN, but it doesn't show it on your thing? If that is you, you're right. It's not showing it. I just want to make sure, because we had one of our folks, that's her. Yeah. All right. You know what? I'm going to hold on. I'm taking a screen copy of this and seeing if I can I'm going to try to get it to somebody myself. No promises, because it's not easy, but I'm going to try. Back to this Washington Post article. So it's talking about how Putin was paralyzed in the hours and even 36 hours after the coup attempt against him. What they found was they talked to Western security officials and also Ukrainian security officials. Putin had been warned. I'm going to read sort of parts of the story. Putin had been warned by the Russian security services at least 2 or 3 days before the coup that Prigozhin was preparing a possible rebellion. Okay? Putin was warned 2 to 3 days before. What did he do? Putin did take steps to try to shore up some of the institutions. He put more security around the Kremlin, for example. Thank you, Red Watts. More staffing at the Presidential Guard. He gave the Presidential Guard more men, but he didn't do anything to actually go after Prigozhin himself. Remember, Prigozhin was the coup leader. He could have just simply gone and arrested Prigozhin and the coup would have stopped. He didn't do it. He simply protected some of the buildings in Moscow, and that was it. According to the Washington Post, they quoted one European security official. Listen to this. Putin had time to take the decision to liquidate the rebellion and arrest the organizers, but he didn't do it. Then when it began to happen, there was paralysis on all levels. There was absolute dismay and confusion. For a long time, they did not know how to react. Then you fast forward. Several hours into the coup, we found out that a group of Prigozhin's men were going north to Moscow. And then remember, a different group went across the Ukrainian border to Rostov. Now, one of these days, I'm going to remember to look at my map. Rostov is right over. I always forget if it's over here from Mariupol or over here. I think it's over here from Mariupol, over here, Rostov. Very close by, okay, to Ukraine. Rostov is a major logistics center for the Russian war in Ukraine. So very important city for the Russians. And there's also some nukes there, we know. Very interesting, right? Well, the Prigozhin troops cross the border. They go to Rostov. They go to take the town because they want to control the logistics of the war. And the Russian troops in Rostov, first of all, the Russian border troops, because these guys are coming from Ukraine. Remember, Prigozhin's men were fighting in Ukraine, the Wagner group. The Russian border troops lay down their weapons and let Prigozhin's men come through. That's the first problem. Second, this is a coup going on, okay? Second problem, they go into Rostov. They go to the main military facilities. The military facilities open their doors. Prigozhin's able to come in, or his men at least are able to come in and take it over. The problem was, according to interview with European security officials, that because this is an autocratic system, basically almost a dictatorship in Russia, and you see this, by the way, you see this problem with the Russian military too. Local officials don't do anything unless they are ordered to from above. So basically, Putin didn't know what the hell he was doing the first 36 hours of the coup. So it means nobody knew what they were doing the first 36 hours. They didn't know at the border whether they should stop these guys or not. They didn't know at the military installations in Rostov itself in Russia whether they should stop the Prigozhin people. And because they didn't get the order from Putin, from Moscow, they opened their doors and let them in, which is fascinating, right? That blows my mind. And it also, by the way, that's a similar problem you have with the Russian military, that basically the Russian military is very top down, unlike our military, and they can't make a lot of decisions at the local level. And you find local people, local officials in the military, local, whatever, soldiers will just keep doing what they're doing, or they'll do nothing because they aren't able to improvise on their own like they would be if they were. I was pointing to the right place. Oh, you are so going to get blocked. No, I'm not pointing to the map wrong. One more comment and you're out of here, Lizco. I was pointing to the map correctly. So thanks for that. Yeah, let it go. One more and you're gone. Just letting you know that. So the, was there here? Final point from the Washington Post article that I thought was really interesting. Russia is a country of mafia rules. This is the quote. And Putin made an unforgivable mistake, said a senior Moscow financier with ties to Russian intelligence services. He lost his reputation as the toughest man in town. This is, and by the way, the article, it's a really interesting article in the Washington Post. It also goes on to say, this also explains why it was that we sat there and went, what the heck's going on? How is Prigozhin able to just start getting closer and closer to Moscow and nobody's stopping him? It's because Putin didn't know what the hell was going on. Thank you, Elizabeth. And Prigozhin was able to advance because the local military and everybody else, nobody had any orders to stop him. Now, I will mention one thing that's not in the article. I'm reading this article and I'm listening to this and I'm hearing how Putin for 36 hours wasn't doing anything. And in my head, what I'm hearing is, was he even alive? And what I mean by alive, was the guy awake? Was the guy aware of his surroundings? Was he sick? Right? Was something going on that Putin was incapacitated during those hours? It's just so hard to believe that for 36 hours, mind you, and Putin was warned 2 or 3 days in advance. For 36 hours, Putin sat there and did nothing while Prigozhin's men advanced. Clearly it happened. But it doesn't make sense to me how it happened unless Putin was incapacitated in some way. Again, it's just a theory that I'm throwing out there. No proof, but it's interesting. All right, let me do a quick little pitch for my work, and then we'll continue with more stories. We'll talk about the grain deal, a drone plant, and some other things coming up. So one of the ways to support my work, which I very much appreciate. You guys know doing the gifts on TikTok, which I very much appreciate. The super chat and the super stickers on YouTube. Super chats are a way of asking questions that I will get to immediately rather than waiting for the second half of the show. If you do a super chat question, I will always get to that as the next question. It also is a way of guaranteeing that I get to your question. I try to get to the questions, but there's so many I can't get to all of them. Thank you, Mark, for the bullseye. But another way of doing it is by basically becoming a member. Becoming a monthly supporter. Now, on YouTube, it's very simple. You will notice the folks like Carlos Bond, like Greg Monroe, Ann Boulis. I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing your name the way we would in Greek. I'm guessing maybe you're Lithuanian, but Bolis, is it Boulis? Susan, Greg, you see a number of these folks. Well, their names are green because they chose, thank you very much, to become monthly supporters of mine on YouTube. You guys can do that by clicking the $sign at the bottom of the comments in YouTube. You will see, I'm getting to you guys next on TikTok. Don't worry. You'll go to the $sign at the bottom of the comment box, click it. You'll see super chat, super sticker. Super sticker is just a way of giving a gift without a question. And memberships. The memberships you click and you'll see the 3 categories of memberships. You can sign up if you want. You pay monthly, you can shut it off whenever you want. It immediately gives you access to a number of emojis, which are kind of fun. But it also gives you VIP access to our auctions and to my Saturday show that I do almost every Saturday. Thank you, Edsel, for that on TikTok. I do a show almost every Saturday morning. Usually we get my friend Vlad from Ukraine beaming in, and it's only for the paid subscribers. Now, on TikTok, very similar process. TikTok, there's 2 different ways on TikTok. One is just to become a TikTok subscriber. I love it if you do that, but I've always got to put a caveat out because what TikTok did, TikTok supposedly, but it doesn't work. When you become a TikTok paid subscriber, you're supposed to get access to my Discord as a VIP member, but it doesn't work. And we keep telling TikTok this and they keep not fixing it for some reason. Thank you, Tukas. Well, keep not fixing it. That's a little bit of a construction, but you know what I mean? They just still aren't fixing it. If you want access to my Saturday show, being a TikTok subscriber still works fine. But if you want access to like the VIP auctions in our Discord, thank you, Nico and Soren, then you actually need to go to Ko-fi and become a Ko-fi subscriber or go to Discord itself because Discord has a way to pay as well. On Ko-fi, the way you guys can do it, this will be it, and we'll go back to the news. On TikTok, go to my profile. you'll see a link in my profile on TikTok. I will bring it up for you guys and show you, that says Linktree. All right. Top of my profile, you go, thank you, Cami. Top of my profile, you see add yours, which nobody knows what that is, tips. And right above it, you see Linktree. There's a Linktree link, right? It says Ko-fi, Discord, blah, blah, Linktree. You click the Linktree link, and the very top thing that comes up should be my Discord. Okay, there we go. Top one says Ko-fi. Ko-fi. Make a one-time or monthly donation to support my work. You click on Ko-fi, and you've got a couple different membership levels you can sign up for. That will let you join the weekend show, but it will also let you join the VIP auctions as well, which I'll tell you about my auctions during the next break we take. In any case, hopefully TikTok can get it working, but in the meantime, go use Ko-fi on TikTok, or for you guys, just become subscribers on the screen itself if you would. I'd really appreciate it. All right. And on TikTok as well, I will say this. The TikTok subscribers also get special emojis as well, which Ashley will be happy to demonstrate in her comments in a moment. Let me have a drink, and then I'll continue with the news. All right. So a little more news. Grain deal update. So, we've been worried about the grain deal. Basically, Russia threatened Ukraine. Oh, okay. We actually really threw them in there. There you go, Ash. Ukraine, the Russians basically stopped the Ukrainians from exporting grain when the war broke out. They're trying to hurt the Ukrainians monetarily because grain is important to Ukraine in terms of their exports. They're trying to hurt developing countries, especially in Africa and the Middle East. They're trying to starve people, quite literally. They think this is going to put pressure on the Western governments to basically lessen the sanctions against Russia. They're hoping that if they cause starvation in the Middle East and starvation in Africa, that some of these people will leave those areas and go to Europe as refugees. And of course, they know that refugees cause political problems, right? In America, but also in Europe, a lot of political issues with all the refugees coming across. So they're trying in a number of ways to just cause a crisis to happen, to try to put so much pressure on the Europeans and the Americans, thank you, Tugas, that hopefully we would say, okay, fine, we'll let you, we'll lessen the sanctions. Well, Russia pulled out of this agreement entirely couple of weeks ago, and now is saying, forget it. We're not going to let any Russian ship or Ukrainian grain ships go. We'll shoot them, whatever. The British Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, came out today and repeated something that the Americans had already alleged. The White House had said, but basically based on British intelligence as well. Oh, hey, Dinos, thank you for following me. Said that the UK believes that Russia may escalate its campaign to destroy Ukraine's food exports by targeting civilian ships in the Black Sea. In other words, the British, along with the Americans, both have intelligence that suggests that the Russians are planning on attacking some civilian grain-carrying ships in order to basically scare off all the other ships from continuing to support Ukraine and export their grain. The good news with all of this is who was this? This was the European Union's Agriculture Commissioner said today, and I find this a little hard to believe, but this is what he said. He said today that the EU is ready to export almost all of Ukraine's agricultural goods via solidarity lanes. These solidarity lanes are basically other ways beyond just the exports that you'd normally get from the Black Sea. Right. So traditionally, Ukraine would use Odessa, and I think there's two other ports around here that they would use to export their grain and then go through the Black Sea, go through the Bosporus by Turkey, and then into the Mediterranean. OK, well, instead, they're going to use land routes. They're using rail. They're using rivers, the Danube, things like this. Now, in the past, I pulled up the number. In the past, 60% of Ukraine's exports were shipped via other European countries. 40% went via the Black Sea. Well, the European Agricultural Commissioner is saying that it looks like almost all of the grain can go via land, in essence, land or river routes instead of the Black Sea. I have a hard time believing that, but that's great if it's true. I just have a hard time believing it. U.S. intelligence. Oh, this was a scary story. Hang on, sip of tea. U.S. intelligence says a new Russian drone plant is potentially, thank you, Delisle, is potentially going to be ready as early next year. That could be January or February if you interpret it to be then. This is the drone plant that the Iranians are helping the Russians build. Now, what's really two things are of concern with this. One is, according to the story, the new drone stockpile will be orders of magnitude larger. In other words, the amount of drones produced will be orders of magnitude larger than what the Russians are currently getting from the Iranians. That's bad. I mean, that's very bad. And this could have a significant impact on the conflict. Now, I will try not this show to spend too much time going after Biden, because Biden, as you know, has annoyed me in the past, because I think that the Americans, but also the British and the French and the Germans, it's not just Biden. I think all three decided to slow walk our aid to Ukraine from the beginning, so that we helped Ukraine, but we didn't want to really help them. We wanted to help them only to a certain degree. We didn't want to anger Russia, right? So we went very slow. By going this slow, and I am going to keep reminding you guys of this though, by going so slowly, we gave Russia time to dig in before the counteroffensive. But Zelensky even said the other day that he had to slow the counteroffensive, and they couldn't even start it on time because they were still waiting for weapons and they were waiting for training. The weapons were coming from the West. The training was coming from the West, okay? Now we find out that this drone plant is going to be operational early next year. Thank you, Purnell. And it's going to be providing way more drones than Russia's got right now, and could be making a huge difference in the war for Russia. Well, the longer we draw the war out, this is what happens. We give Russia a chance to regroup. Yeah, I'm going to stop right there. A report by the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner supports the conclusions. This was a story from CNN of an extensive CNN investigation published in August of last year, which showed that the Russian narrative that a Russian-run camp for Ukrainian POWs had been hit by a Ukrainian HIMARS rocket. This is a horrific paragraph written by CNN. I'm just going to tell you what happened because some child wrote that paragraph. Okay, last year, Eastern Ukraine, the Russians have a prisoner of war camp. They've got a lot of Ukrainian soldiers there. There's, an explosion at the plant, and somehow all the Ukrainian soldiers, 50 of them, burn alive and die. Russia says, oh, that was a Ukrainian HIMARS. The Ukrainians used the American weapon and blew the plant up. Everybody else said that's ridiculous. Well, CNN does an investigation, and the CNN investigation finds there's no way in hell that it was an American HIMARS that blew it up. Well, the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner, the United Nations just did an investigation as well. Thank you, Cheryl, for that. And the United Nations also found that what the Russians are claiming is a lie. The Russians are lying. Now, they did not yet find what caused it, but they said the Russians are absolutely lying. It was not basically, it wasn't the Ukrainians who did it. So, take three guesses who did it. Last story, I will just tell you this one briefly, but I've been talking about conscription, basically draft in Russia, and how the Russians understandably are very worried about drafting people, because the last time Putin had a draft of 300,000 men last fall, 1 million of his countrymen fled the country in fear. All right. So Putin has been very afraid to have a nationwide draft again, but it seems they need more men. And yesterday I reported on the fact that they were changing the maximum, or the age of retirement. It's the upper age limit. That was it. They were changing the upper age limit on certain categories of soldiers. Like in some categories, you have to retire at age 45. They increased it to 50. Other categories, you have to retire at 55. They increased it to 60, right? Well, so that was the first thing. And they're doing it to basically keep more men in the military because they need more men. Well, now what Putin is doing, and the Duma, the parliament in Russia is doing, the maximum age limit at which men can be conscripted will rise in Russia from 27 to 30 starting next January. Okay. Now, what does that mean? That means that you're going to all of a sudden have a lot more men. You're going to have 28, 29, and maybe 30-year-olds, depending how you count it, who you're going to be able to draft as well, right? What this means is clearly the Russians are worried they don't have enough men, but at the same time, clearly Putin is worried that he's going to get some nasty blowback from the Russian people if he tries to have any kind of a draft. So he's trying yet again to have this weird backhanded, back alley draft that no one's going to know about it because he's afraid. And it's just interesting that he's that worried. We talked about this the other day with my friend Marion, that he's that worried about sort of the reaction at home. All right, that's it for the news. I will do a quick show and tell of some of our auction items. You guys know I do like to do that because, as I said, we use our auction items to raise money for Ukraine and to raise money to support my work. What we do is we've got a Discord community. It's free. You can check it out at discord.aravosis.com. I've got the link actually also in my bio on TikTok. If you want, click the Linktree link. Second thing that comes up is Discord. That's a fake notification. This is a Russian troll we get all the time, by the way, on TikTok, just so you know. Thank you for doing that. I just like to sort of, I don't want to dwell on it, but I like to sort of let the TikTokers know that the Russian trolls like to throw that garbage in there. So in any case, one of the things we like to do in the Discord is I find cool stuff in Ukraine, bring it, I feel like the Grinch, bring it back here, and then auction it off. Well, we're auctioning off a number of things. 50% of all the auction money that we raise from your bids, I channel back into Ukraine. 50%, literally 50% off the top, boom. I send it back to Ukraine. Vlad uses it for our humanitarian work. We've also lately been helping the military build camouflage nets, all sorts of different things. The other 50% goes to support me for my work because this is my full-time job. I am not independently wealthy, and the way I'm able to keep doing this and pay the bills is because of your guys' gifts, but also the auctions help to a degree as well. So far, we've been able to send $10,000 over to Ukraine just from the auctions itself, which has been nice, though a lot more from the fundraisers we've done generally. In any case, let me show you a couple of the auction items. We've got 10 auction items. They are finishing tomorrow. What I'm doing every Wednesday, the recap is always at the end of the show. You know that. You know that. You know better on TikTok. We do the recap at the end. We don't do it in the middle. The auctions are always up for a week, and they end on Wednesday. Different times on Wednesday. You can go and click the end time and see when it ends. But let me show you a couple of the different things we've got. Probably our most popular item this week, and Malayathos, I will get to your question right after. Our most popular item this week is a Ukrainian military belt. Thank you, Dan. Really cool brass belt, a little bit of an older vintage belt from Ukrainian military. I'm going to guess this belt could be from the 90s, but it probably could be from the 1980s as well, because I owned this belt, but I owned the Russian version. Excuse me, I owned the Soviet version. I'll do it for you guys. You can see it's faux black leather. This is the actual end loop that hooks onto here. It hooks onto the hook in back. But I've got the Soviet version that's really cool, and it's brass. The newer ones, I actually do have some of the newer ones I'm going to auction off as well. Thank you, Dan. But the newer ones I've got are not brass. You can tell they're a lighter material. This one's brass, and it's got a nice old patina that's nice. You can always clean it up if you want, but it's pretty cool. Anyway, I think it's pretty cool. It could make it, actually, I didn't think it could make an interesting dog collar if you've got a big enough dog. Yeah. If you had a big enough dog, you could do it. I thought you meant a dog collar for a person. You could use it for that too. We're a diverse show here. We welcome everybody. Let me put this away and I'll show you a couple other things, and then we'll get to Malayathos' question. The second thing is, which personally, I love this. Is it 19? I'm thinking 1990s. The only reason I say it could be the 80s is because I have a Soviet belt that is the same look and era, clearly. And clearly the Soviet Union ended in 1991. So it's possible it's late 80s as well. But that's what I'm saying, 80s or 90s for sure. This is neat. It's a Ukrainian traffic cop police badge, and it's real. I love this. So this is up for auction too. It says, Ukraini, the Ministry of the Interior is the symbol on the top, not the symbol, but the name on the top. And then it says I always forget, Derj something or other. I always forget, it's a Derzhana, Derzhavna or something, state. And it says Auto Inspekcja, meaning auto inspector or auto inspection, state auto inspector. They're the state traffic cops. I think it's really cool. The final thing I'll show you really quick, I always show you guys this, but I think it's really neat, is this wonderful necklace made by one of our Discord, our members here on the show with us, Larissa. Larissa is Wild Hunt Corsetry is her name she goes by. And it's this beautiful handmade Ukrainian necklace she made. It is done in the old style. It is a specific pattern. You can see I've got big pictures up on the Discord of it, but it's really neat. It's a beautiful necklace she made. She's a Ukrainian American, and her mother makes those Ukrainian painted eggs and stuff. And she has she herself is an artist and is learning all of the old Ukrainian techniques for making jewelry and things like that. So she donated it to us to use for our auction. We have a lot of other really cool things. Go check them out. Discord.aravosis.com. The Discord's free. The auctions, it just depends. So go check them out. There we go. Oh, time for some wings. Angel gets its wings. Angel gets its wings. There we go. Bye-bye. Okay. I just blocked a Russian. It felt good. All right. Malayathos is asking, hi, John, any update on the IRA troll farms rebranding and the status of the Wagner operations in Africa now that Prigozhin is out? So what? Oh, nice, Cammy, with the angels. Putting multiples works quite well. Thank you for that. You guys have an angel emoji as well on the YouTube subscribers now have an angel emoji as well. The YouTube members. Thank you, Sean, for that. So there's no updates. No. So interesting question with Prigozhin. And by the way, please do keep the gifts coming on TikTok too, guys. Thank you. Prigozhin, the Wagner Group leader who was caught up in the coup, he's the guy who ran the coup against Putin. Well, he's also the guy, we sort of forget this. He's the guy that also runs the internet or ran the Internet Research Agency. The Internet Research Agency is the Russian group that basically attacked the American election in 2016. Thank you, Lori, for the heart, in 2016. So the question becomes, if Prigozhin is being sidelined and having to live in exile or something in Belarus, what happens to that, right? Is he still running the Internet Research Agency? Is somebody else running it? But frankly, even Wagner Group, Wagner Group is still going to exist, at least in Belarus, it still exists. I read today there may be as many as 3,000 or 5,000 men already in Belarus of the Wagner Group's men. Is he still running it? Right? The group's name is the Internet Research Agency. IRA, which ironically, but it's Internet Research Agency. The other issue is that, thank you, Dan, for the hat, is that the Wagner Group has been doing a ton of work in Africa, Mali, Middle East and Syria, also I think Central African Republic, some other countries, and they're basically soldiers for hire for those governments. In exchange, they've gotten access to ownership of, or partial ownership in diamond mines and mineral mines and things like this in Africa. Do they still have that? Is Putin taking it away from them? Are they still working for these governments? I don't know, Malayathos. And what's interesting is there hasn't really been any discussion of it. My suspicion is there's been no discussion of it because nobody has any idea what the hell is happening. I'm going to guess that Putin himself doesn't know what to do. I believe it was the Washington Post article that I mentioned earlier to you guys that was talking about how Putin basically didn't know what the hell he was doing for the first 36 hours of the coup. One of the things it was saying was that Putin, thank you, Susanna, for the lights, that Putin did not take action on Prigozhin because so much of Prigozhin's work was so intimately intertwined with Russia's overall policy goals and foreign policy, right? Internet Research Agency. Prigozhin was the guy, at least one of the top guys in charge of attacking the American elections, right? How do you get rid of that? And it meant he had a lot of connections and a lot of sway, right? People knew who he was. They knew he was good. Africa, Prigozhin's the guy in charge of Putin's big foreign policy in Africa, so to speak, using these men to prop up these governments in Mali and Central African Republic, in Syria's government, the money coming in from the mines that these guys own, right? Thank you, Sisso, and Dak as well for the heart. So it's really difficult for Putin to figure out what he can do to strike back at Prigozhin for the coup. And I think that's why we don't know yet, because Putin probably doesn't know yet what the hell he's going to do with Prigozhin having his fingers in so many of the important areas that Putin does, like the Internet Research Agency, like the Wagner Group's work in Africa. So the fact that Putin doesn't know yet is probably why we don't know yet. I'm not trying to be vague, but I think we're not seeing stories on it because Putin has no idea what to do, because he wants to kill this guy. That was Sasha eating, correct? Well, that was Sasha drinking water and her little thing hitting. I'm surprised you could hear that. That's funny. Annie has a question. Annie, super chat question. The Russian border, how difficult is it for their citizens to come and go, thinking of all those men that fled the draft, and guess if they get caught, they get drafted or maybe prison? Generally speaking, I don't know how it was in Russia. I know that right now, well, okay, We know they clamped down on men leaving the country, right? Because I even know of people who we were trying to help get out of the country. And it was not an easy thing figuring out how do you get out of Russia, right? I know right now they're trying to, I don't think Russia's done it yet. They're trying to make it illegal for I don't know what the law is going to say, whether it's men of draft age or whether it's men who have been drafted to leave the country. I think men who have been drafted, thank you, LWD. I believe for men who have been drafted, it has already been made illegal against the law for you to try to get out of the country because for some crazy reason, it wasn't illegal. I think now they're trying to make it illegal for like any to leave the country. Now, mind you, Ukraine does that. I mean, Ukraine says no man of military age can leave the country unless you have permission basically from the government. But generally speaking, you can't leave. So right now, I guess the question becomes, how hard is it to leave? For example, if Putin does another draft and you get another million Russians who want to leave, how hard is it for them to leave? If it's against the law, I mean, I don't know enough about the Russian border, whether you really can get across the Russian border easily or whether pretty much the Russian border is pretty well protected so that you're not going to get into Georgia and some of these other countries, that border it. You're certainly not going to get into Europe. We know that's not going to happen, probably. But I don't know. Yeah. All I can do is give you sort of that background, but I do know they're trying to make it illegal for the men to even leave. Yeah. Thank you, LWD, for that. What else we got? More questions. Cliff. Again, I ask why U.S. Navy destroyers can't escort grain ships. Why are we so chicken? From your lips, Cliff. What Cliff is talking about is something that actually, thank you, Hector. And we also have user 2119. Thank you guys both for the gifts there on TikTok. Cliff is talking about something that Admiral Stavridis has talked about. Stavridis is a U.S. Admiral, retired, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, so big guy. And he has proposed that basically NATO escort the grain ships and provide protection. Now, whether that means the ships would go under a NATO flag, in other words, because we had done this, thank you, LWD, years ago with the Persian Gulf. I seem to recall we had put some of the oil ships under U.S. flag, I want to say, so that basically we said, if you attack the ships, you attack us. Something like that we had done. And Stavridis is proposing the same thing. Basically, I think he didn't get into the details, but said either we escort them and say we will protect them, or we actually protect them because we also put our flags on them. That's going to take bigger backbone than Biden's got. Thank you, Cheryl Moore, for that. That's going to take way more backbone than Biden's got. He's not going to do it. He's just not going to do it. LWD, you're being very generous tonight. Thank you for that. I can tell they're all coming from you. And who was that? Oh, and Dan. Thank you, Dan, as well. Appreciate that. Anyway, all right. What other questions we got, guys? Will there be an official draft in the end? Putin cannot bend the rules forever, Pedro asks. He's afraid of doing it. I mean, he's afraid of doing it. And honestly, he saw what happened. The first time he did it, up to a million men fled the country in a panic. He doesn't want it. He's afraid of his position if he has a real draft. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he certainly can try to muddle through, Thank you, Flower Lady. He's trying to, and Bulford, he's trying to muddle through where maybe he's got enough men, by changing the draft age and this kind of stuff. I guess I don't think we know enough what's going on inside Russia to fully understand what Putin is so afraid of. You know what I mean? But what I mean is we talked about the other day with Marion, but I still find it very strange that Putin seems so terrified of having a draft. Thank you, Jesse. Actually, I will say this. Putin may have shot himself in the foot because when the war started, he said it was a special military operation. It wasn't a war. So it wasn't going to be such a big deal, right? Then he said, remember, it was going to be short, They didn't expect it to go on very long at all. They even brought their formal military uniforms, the Russians did, because they thought they were going to be they thought within a week or two, they'd be in a parade in downtown Kyiv, Ukraine, because they would win the war in 10 days. I think Putin, thank you, Callum, Putin so downplayed the war that now he's in a bit of a pickle, a gherkin. Thank you, Kanowski, when it comes to having a draft. Thank you again, Callum. Those hats always freak me. They're so cool, but they're so weird. Because he so downplayed it. How do you have a draft, right? I mean, because you're basically admitting things aren't going well. And I think, actually, I know what I was going to say. Thank you, Jesse, for the pearl. I think you also, and user 2119, you also have the situation, and Gary, and user 2119, who also we got. Thank you, guys. Oh, and Elizabeth with the helmet, and Gary again. You've also got the situation where the Russian population has a pretty good sense of how the war is going, and they know it ain't going well. They know they've lost a lot of men. First of all, they know they lost a lot of men because the men are coming home. Thank you, LWD. They're coming home with limbs missing, or they're coming home dead, or they're not coming home at all. They're lost, right? They know that. So that if you're trying to have a nationwide mobilization and a draft, I would think it's even harder now for Russia than it would have been a year ago. Because a year ago, at least, you had some hope. Whereas now you're doing it because you're a little more desperate. And honestly, do you want to send your kid or your husband to a war where your leader's desperate because everyone's getting killed? Basically Russia's even more afraid today, I think, than they were last September in terms of Russians. If you tell them, do you really want to go to this war? Any case, a few more questions. See, my tea is working. I hope it didn't make me speak too fast, but I've been I told you, my dog had me up for 2 hours last night. She wasn't feeling well. Thank you, LWD and user 336. So I did middle of the night, lost 2 hours of sleep. So I'm just exhausted. We still don't, okay. Good question. Marvin asks, where is the Wagner group getting their military equipment now? We know Wagner turned over a lot of their military equipment in Ukraine to the Russians. That happened in the last week. And supposedly most of it was turned over. Yet at the same time, I read today that the Wagner guys in Belarus, where Prigozhin, the leader, was basically exiled, but kind of finally ended up there. He was kind of having fun in Russia. In the meantime, thank you, LWD, that they had 6 of some very special vehicles. I'm forgetting the name of the vehicles. And I was reading it going, well, how did they get these very special military vehicles? I thought they were supposed to turn everything in. So again, interesting question as to, are the, thank you, Flower Lady. Oh, no, different kind of lemonade. I hadn't seen that one before. That's cool. Are the Wagner groups getting, are they getting any support from Russia now? Putin claims he gave $1 billion to them last year. Is the Russian government still paying their salaries? Is the Russian government still providing any equipment to them? Thank you, LWD, for the lion or the Leon. We don't know. We just don't know. And honestly, it's still not even clear why they're in Belarus at all. I think this is a kludge is a good word for it. If you don't know the word kludge, basically, well, I was going to say a cluster F, but in the sense that, thank you, LWD, Putin would rather kill Prigozhin and get rid of Wagner entirely because they tried to overthrow him and he might have been killed. He can't do that because Prigozhin knows too many people and has too much power. He also can't get rid of Wagner because Wagner is too important to him because, frankly, it's the best soldiers he's got. They're war criminals, but they're still the best soldiers he's got. And they're incredibly influential in the Middle East and in Africa. And Putin doesn't want to give that up. So Putin's in this weird spot where he would much rather just get rid of these guys, but he can't. So he sends them to Belarus. He doesn't dismantle them. But now I think he's still in this weird spot of, does he keep supporting them? Right? He's got to keep supporting them. But how does he keep supporting them, but keep them on enough of a leash that maybe they don't turn on him again? I don't know. Thank you, LWD, for the cat. I think Putin's still trying to figure out what kind of support he's going to give to Wagner going forward. I just don't think he knows. Now, Prigozhin himself is a billionaire, so Prigozhin himself perhaps has the money to pay them anyway. I don't know. He is a billionaire. But, hate to keep saying I don't know, but we just don't know what's going on with all of that right now. Paul is saying Belarus is the only place friendly to Russia that isn't Russia, so it's the only place he can go. I mean, he can go to a few other horrible places: Syria, North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, Libya. Who am I missing? There may be somebody else I'm missing there. Aren't a lot of great choices for where he can go. Yeah. And at least Belarus, Iran, exactly, Iran. But at least Belarus is right next door. They speak more or less the same language. I mean, right? They understand each other. So it's a lot better than going to a place where they speak Spanish or Arabic, right? So I think Belarus is, first of all, what we saw too, Prigozhin isn't even in exile. The first month, Prigozhin was bopping back and forth from Moscow to St. Petersburg. He wasn't even in Belarus, basically flaunting the fact that he wasn't even going there, you know? So, I mean, you know, anyway. Did we have, make sure I got all the, okay, I did get all your guys' questions. Good. Okay. All right. Couple more questions. Oh, LWD with the crazy, scary clown bus. I am not one who thinks clowns are scary, but I will admit those clowns are scary. That is true. All right, guys, maybe another question or two, and then we'll wrap it up. Yes, Thanatos, at the beginning of the show, I did talk about the UN watchdog finding landmines outside the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. It's okay. But basically I mentioned that what the UN said was it did not look like the mines would cause any real damage, which led me to wonder whether this was part of a false flag. Basically, whether the mines are there to stop the Ukrainians from taking the plant back, but they're also there for the Russians to have lots of theatrical explosions that they can then pretend the plant has been breached or some such thing. You know, I think we're not gonna do Discord tonight, only because we did it last night. So I try not to do it every night because normally we go there like for another hour. So I'd rather not do another hour every night because that adds a lot. And all because I'm exhausted because, like I said, the dog woke me up literally at 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. I was dealing with dog going back and forth, clearly uncomfortable. And then finally she got comfortable and I was like, oh my God, it was 5:30. So, I don't know about the latest weapons from the Brits, if there are any. I know the Americans. Michael, I don't know. What do you want me to tell you? You keep spamming the same question. What do you think with the British approach to the war? I mean, it's good. The problem is it's too vague of a question. I mean, the Brits have been very sort of forward thinking, I would say. The Brits have been very, I would say, acting almost like Eastern Europe. I would put the Brits in the same camp as the Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, being very like boom, boom, boom to the Russians. We need to help Ukraine more. Boris Johnson, for all of his foibles, was great on this stuff, right? So I think the Brits have done a great job, and I wish our government had been more aggressive like the Brits have been, because I think we've been pulling punches, and I think we're still pulling punches. So that is my answer. But I think the Brits have done a very good job in that regard. But their attitude, I think, is very good. The time you usually wake up, it's the time I'm usually very much asleep. What else we got, guys? Anything else? Will Russia ever have a functional, non-corrupt government? I don't know. I mean, Sobo's saying it seems like they've had centuries of bad government, but that's what worries me. I mean, I just don't, I don't know how you take a country and make it go from corrupt to not corrupt, and how you make it go from anti-democratic to democratic. You can have revolutions, but as we're seeing in Hungary, for example, the revolutions can still be pedaled backwards, right? We're seeing in America, democracy, unfortunately, even if you can get it, what's the counter if you can keep it? But even if you can get it, it tends to continue through, what's the word I'm looking for? Through comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y. It tends to continue through unanimous consent that we all agree to more or less obey the rules. And what we found in the US, but probably in Europe as well, you're finding is when somebody decides not to follow the rules of democracy, all of a sudden we all go, right? Well, either we all go, I don't know what to do, or we all go, yes, sir, we love you, even if you don't really believe in America's democracy. So I don't know what you do in a country like Russia that has been so undemocratic for centuries. I think I've always believed you need revolutions, meaning you need popular support to change, that no one can change Russia. Russia needs to change itself. You did have revolutions in Eastern Europe. You had the Europeans stepping forward and violently overthrowing these communist dictatorships in many places, right? You needed that because you needed them to themselves say, enough is enough, right? That they had ownership in it, that they did it. Because I think if it just sort of happens, I feel like it can easily go away too. So I don't know. I think Russia has to have a revolution if it's going to get democracy. And even then, will it stick? They don't have a culture of democracy. They don't have a history of democracy. Anyway, I mean, I'm not enough of a historian on that. I mean, but it is a question that I've always wondered, because I wonder this about Greece, where my family's from originally, because, Greece and many European countries, there's a lot of corruption, and it worries me. And I don't know how Greece can ever get beyond that. And I worry about African corruption, whether is Africa ever going to be able to have, well, not Africa, I shouldn't say overall, but are a lot of these African countries ever going to be able to have democracies, really? And are a lot of these countries ever going to get over the graft and the corruption? I'm not sure they will. I don't know how you do it, So, I mean, as I said, and it's not just an African problem, Greece, I don't know how Greece gets beyond it, and if Greece can't get beyond it, how does the Russia? I don't know. It's very, and again, I won't keep rehashing this, but our experience in America over the last several years has been that even the democracy we have and some of the anti-corruption ethos we had gets thrown out the window. That's okay, Michael. I appreciate it. Sometimes there are trolls that ask questions repeatedly. That's why. That's one reason I said it. And the mods will often ask you not to, because it's often a troll that's throwing the same question repeatedly. Yeah, that's okay. Don't worry about it. It's a fine question. I was at first I didn't answer because it was too vague, but then I thought about it and said, well, okay, overall, I guess there is an answer to that as far as Britain. In any case, okay, so you know what, guys, I'm going to sum up with that, because I think that's maybe a good way of ending. It's a nice sort of thinky way for us all to think about, how is it that we become democracies, and how is it that we stay democracies? Jen is throwing in a last little thing. I did hear about Trevor Reed fighting in Ukraine. Yeah, wounded and transferred to Germany. Trevor Reed was an American that was, I guess, jailed in Russia for 3 years, was released last year and went to fight in Ukraine. And he was just wounded in Ukraine fighting the Russians, and now is in Germany, getting better or getting treated. Interesting story. Interesting story. Nothing to really add to it, but I thought it was interesting that, imagine somebody like him 3 years in a Russian prison as an American and coming out and getting the chance to fight the Russians. He probably was like, yes, I wouldn't blame him, after that experience. All right, guys, let me do the quick summary of the news, which are the stories we hit today. And then I am going to not go to the Discord, but I will tell you, as I said, we've got 10 auction items ending tomorrow in the Discord, including the cool Ukrainian jewelry and a lot of really neat Ukrainian stuff, like the belt, the police badge, a Zelensky sweatshirt, the sweatshirts that Zelensky wears. We found the same store and bought them from there. A lot of really cool stuff. Go check it out. The auctions end tomorrow. And then I'm going to put more stuff up on Thursday. More cool stuff on Thursday. I'm always getting new stuff. Thank you, Maverick. All right, let me summarize the news that we hit today, and we will say goodnight. It is day 516 of Vladimir Putin's 3-day special military operation. Zaporizhia nuclear plant, the International Atomic Energy Agency, a UN watchdog, did in fact find anti-personnel mines surrounding the plant that the Russians placed, but they said that the mines most likely would not cause serious damage. Ukraine confirmed that it has used cluster bombs around Bakhmut. Imprisoned Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny said that Igor Girkin, the Russian military blogger and war criminal who was recently arrested for criticizing Putin, is a political prisoner who is being detained illegally. And I talked about that. Washington Post has a fascinating article you all should check out today if you have access to the Post, talking about Putin basically being paralyzed and unable to make a decision in the first 36 hours of the coup. Really interesting story. Grain deal update. British Foreign Secretary says that the UK agrees with America, that they're very concerned. Basically, it sounds like they have evidence that Russia may try to blow up a civilian ship carrying Ukrainian grain. The European Union is reportedly ready to export almost all of Ukraine's grain, which is a good deal. That would have normally gone by sea. Let's see. I think that sounds very optimistic, but the European Union's agricultural commissioner is saying that, so hopefully that's true. U.S. intelligence says a new Russian drone plant built with the help of the Iranians will be operational early next year, and it's going to be producing a lot of drones and could make a significant impact on the war. That's bad. A report by the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner supports the conclusions of an extensive CNN investigation that an explosion and a fire that killed 50 Ukrainian prisoners of war last year in eastern Ukraine was not caused by Ukrainian HIMARS. The Russians who controlled the facility claimed the Ukrainians killed the Ukrainian 50 prisoners, when pretty much everybody agrees it was the Russians who decided to murder these 50 men, which of course is a war crime. And finally, conscription we talked about, which is kind of an ongoing story with Russia. Keep an eye, but clearly Putin feels they need more men, and they're trying to find sort of legalistic ways of changing the age of the draft, changing the age of retirement, these kind of things, in order to keep more men in the military without having to have an actual draft, because Putin is afraid of having an actual draft because he's afraid the Russian people are going to rise up against him. Interesting story. Keep an eye on that in terms of Putin's stability as a leader, his position, but also where Russia is going with this and whether Russia really needs to get, whether they have enough men, period, for this war. All right, guys, that is the summary of our stories today. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, mods, for getting the trolls. I saw somebody say we had a lot of trolls tonight, so thank you for doing that. Thank you for your guys' gifts on TikTok and YouTube and elsewhere. Thank you, Sean, for the dinosaur. I love my dinosaurs. And remember, guys, if you want, whether you're watching the show later on rerun on YouTube or anywhere else, if you want to become a paying subscriber, I would very much appreciate it. You can, on YouTube, just click that $sign at the bottom of the screen near the comment box, look for the membership option, click it, and you can subscribe. For you guys on TikTok, you can subscribe via TikTok subscriptions, but you can also click the Linktree link in my profile on TikTok. And the very first thing that comes up is Ko-fi. And Ko-fi is another way of basically a monthly subscription service that will give you, you'll know that you're supporting my work, which I very much appreciate to keep the show going, but also will give you access to my Saturday show, VIP membership on my Discord, which gives you access to the VIP auction area, things like that. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Thank you, Paul. I am going to say au revoir, and we will see each other tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, US, okay, for the next show. All right, thanks, guys. Yeah, the Sunday show was fun. Yeah, we did, actually, I'll tell really quick, we did a Sunday show, a special Sunday show for the subscribers, the paid subscribers from Eastern Ukraine. Vlad, our friend who does all the charity work with us, Vlad was in Eastern Ukraine at one of the facilities where they're making camouflage nets for the Ukrainian military that we have been helping raise money for, and showed us the volunteers making the nets, explained the process to us. We got to talk to them. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun. All right. Salut, Tuga. All right, guys. Anyway, see you all tomorrow night. Thank you. 6 p.m. Eastern Time, US. And I mean, I'll be on the Discord. I always check into the Discord. I just didn't want to hold court on the Discord because I'm tired. But I check in the Discord all day long and all night long until I go to bed. So if you've got questions for me or comments or anything, feel free to go to our Discord, discord.aravosis.com. You can find the link actually in my profile on TikTok. Click that link. Discord's the second thing that comes up. You can always go there and ask me a question. I respond to every question on the Discord. So, all right. Thanks, guys. See you tomorrow night.